Hey everybody, and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program RP-0. We're back in the VAB doing a little bit more building. Just a brief update. I have been working on a ultra heavy lifter to replace the DN-5 now that we do have the RS-25s unlocked and available for our copious use. But it's not going particularly well. So for the time being, just to eke out a little bit more cargo to orbit and cargo to Mars, I've just decided to upgrade the DN-5B as it sits. And really kind of as a test bed for that, I decided I was going to build a new resupply slug for Harmonia Station, because they're going to need some life support, and obviously they're going to need a bunch of fuel in order to get them home. So I know our next Mars window is quite a great distance away, but I figured now is as good a time as any to go ahead and get some things under construction. Sorry. The prototypes for the RS-25 powered super heavy lifter, which will basically take over all the super heavy jobs from the DN-5B, is going to require a bigger launch pad. We are running into height restrictions, and not only on the launch pad for things that we can actually field out there, but here in the VAB, the rockets I'm building are too tall even for in here, so I can't get a whole lot of things done. So I have spent $1 million upgrading our launch pad and another $1 million upgrading the VAB, which seemed like an appropriate use of funds, sort of. But it'll be about 190 days before those become available to us, but I figured, well, we can do more prototyping then. So for the time being, I'm just going to go ahead and get these things built. So onto the slug that we're mostly building. This was still kind of an early prototype, just getting all the numbers figured out and then trying to get RCS placement figured out, and deciding that I'm not 100% on this this style or this design choice, but I'm gonna fidget with it for a lot longer because I am stubborn, and RCS Build Aid just does not particularly like this layout, and I sure would like it to be a lot easier to dock. So positioning things around and trying to figure out good RCS placement, it just doesn't work for me. So you know what, we're just gonna start fresh with a single fillet cylinder, because part count needs to be taken into consideration a lot for these things. Our part count out at Harmonia was getting a little ridiculous, especially with the old style tugs that were probably 30 or 40 parts just for the tug, and like another 20 for the resupply slug. We're just going to combine them all. We no longer need the multiple docking port requirement from our old slugs, because we're not going to be daisy chaining. We're going to be refueling and then abandoning. So we're going to strip down our part count as much as possible. We will have just this one primary tank up top and a small dedicated fuel tank below it for a single AJ-10 Advanced. So here I am just plotting out all the stuff we can do for resupply. And because it's a single tank, and therefore lighter because you lose less to structural fraction, we can actually wedge a lot more stuff in there. I think we're getting easily an extra third of our supplies out to the station once I kind of get myself happy with the numbers here. Yeah, looks pretty good. And then I'll just size up this dedicated fuel tank and tuck it in, make it look a little bit better. Kind of the awkwardest of teardroppy shapes, but it'll be powered by 4 RTGs. We just have the single 1 meter core that pulls like 750 watts nominally. So those 4 RTGs are absolutely required. I like these booms because they give you lots of torque, but they're just not powerful enough. So we're going to be going with the big thrusters, as well as some alternate tiny thrusters down here that will help us turn. And RCS Build Aid is actually never happy with anything. That's just fantastic. I'll check just a couple more axes here and try to get rid of as much of that torque as I possibly can. But I've almost given up. Anyway, it's going to need independent comms just to get it to Mars once it's in orbit. The internal comms should be able to handle everything. And, of course, we're going to need a heat shield. since this thing is remarkably heavy, we're going to go with a lunar rated heat shield just to make sure that it can survive an aero capture maneuver that will inevitably take it very deep into Mars' atmosphere. And then we're going to attach below it a standard DN-5B, which needs to be upgraded. That was an HG3 that we pulled off, but I like these models so much more. So we'll switch out for the HG3 on our upper stage. We'll also extend the runtime on the upper stage just a little bit. I know it makes it a little bit heavier, but I think we can handle it. Well, alright, we're going to fuel up our boosters so we can get an accurate estimation of their runtime, and we're going to strip off those HG3s. And then it is time to install different mounting brackets, or at least a 4-way symmetry mounting bracket, and 4 RS-25D/Es. We'll just tuck those nicely into the fuel tank there. Yeah, not bad. I think that looks pretty good, actually. Now we'll just put the appropriate mixture of liquid hydrogen, liquid oxygen in, and double check our stage and our timing. Let's take it outside for a test run. Alright, well, out here on the launch pad and a little bit more of our sped up footage. I'm going to go ahead and light these engines, and wow, those RS-25s popped a little bit when we pulled off the pad, but wow, we are going. Our thrust to weight ratio is a bit more impressive this time. We're down to 4 RS-25s DEs from our 5 HG3s, and we still have more thrust off the pad than we did before, which is absolutely phenomenal. But this slug that we're sending comes in at about 55 tons, which is really very, very, very top end on what the DN-5B would be able to put to Mars. And really, even then, it depends a lot on the plane change. If we don't get it just right, then we got to use a bunch of fuel from the slug itself, and we're really trying to avoid that. We'd like to just put it on course and have it go. So there it is. We've got a failure on one of our E1s for the booster, of course, during a test. So I'm going to bring up this tank, and the idea here is when it comes time to stage, I'm going to lock one of the fuels here in the very bottom of this, and hopefully that should deprive all the engines of that on that booster of their fuel and not send it careening into the top of the rocket. You know, because that works out. But taking nice advantage of that high gimbal range on those RS-25s, we are able to keep ourselves pretty much in and stable, and I kind of overestimated exactly how much thrust we had and aimed way too high, figuring, oh, that loss of a booster is really going to cost us, so I better lob it a little bit. I could have been much more aggressive in this gravity turn and probably not sacrificed a whole hell of a lot. I actually may have come out a lot more efficient if I had just kind of kept leaning into the gravity turn. Of course, trying to fight with the rocket to keep it on course meant that I was not paying as much attention to my altitude or anything else, really. But those moments when I check my heading and check my time to apogee is when I start to make these grand corrections. Alright, well, we're coming up on booster sep, so I'll just get myself ready and deactivate. Nope, there was still more left in the tank. Loss of a single E1 on those boosters really has an effect. But there it flamed out, and it was clear of the rocket, so we're still in good shape. We'll go ahead and ditch the fairings about 30 kilometers too late. And really, we can just aim straight down the horizon. We've got a lot of time built up before we get to our apogee, so it's now just kind of an easy ride. And actually, this is the first rocket that I've built with these RS-25s that I am actually happy with the look of, which we all know that's super important. We are way under the rated burn time for the RS-25, which I think is rated at 10 minutes. I could be wrong on that one, but I'm about 95% sure it's 10 minutes. Either way, we're coming in somewhere closer to 6, maybe 7 minutes if you carry the 1. So we are in no danger of surpassing our burn time. They do kind of pour through some fuel, but man, that's a stout engine. I'm very happy with these so far. And as we come down to the last kilometer per second on our core stage, It does look like that we'll have enough Delta V left to put the upper stage into orbit and have the 4 point some odd kilometers remaining to make a transfer to Mars. Now, I have to take into account that the failure of that engine on the booster did cost us probably quite a bit, and that my angle here at the flight path was also extraordinarily suboptimal. So I'm pretty convinced that this can do what I need it to do without too much problem. And there's a stage set, and the HG3 is lit, and off it goes. We could probably get this to Mars without too much issue. Yeah, like I was just saying. I think that my flight was messed up and we lost an engine on the booster. So we're actually coming into orbit a little shy of what Delta V we would have during an absolutely normal flight. And I need to take that into consideration, because if any other changes need to be made to this launch vehicle as it sits, I'd rather not put it into production. But we've got a few minutes of burn time left on this HG3, but as you can see, we're still climbing. We're actually in no danger whatsoever of passing our apogee and starting to fall back to the planet. This stage I did stretch just a little bit, but it was really just to get a couple more seconds of runtime. This stage has never actually pushed the HG3 to its full rated runtime of 10 minutes. We never needed it to. We were always getting fairly deliverable Delta V's out of it, just running it for around 7. I think on the top end we may have pushed it up to 8 in some runs. But all in all, I think it's fairly satisfactory, despite the fact that that fuel slug is rather awkward and weird. But it's super low part count, and that's part of my requirements for sending anything else out to Harmonia Station, is that we don't give my poor computer a heart attack when everything comes into render range. And yeah, there's our camera change. We are coming up in orbit, but since we're so far behind our perigee, it's actually not going to quite limit it up. So we're going to shut the engine down, and I'm just going to take a small stock and assessment on if this is going to give me a rating. It is not, but Harmonia Station's good for a couple of years. We really don't have to go back and worry about those guys. They are in solid shape. And just a quick check here on Kerbal Alarm Clock to see when our transfer window to Mars is. So it looks like, without even really breaking a sweat, we should be able to launch at our next Mars window, get a supply slug out to them, and really one life support slug should tide them over until their next come home window. So that's the plan. We'll probably have to send another one for fuel, but I don't think I'll bore you guys with that. That's going to do it for this one, everybody. Thank you so much for hanging out. I do appreciate it, and I'll see all of you in the next one. So until then, see you later.